He's got a great job now, mind you, but his career as a coach is over, but it doesn't need to be. Would you like to see him do it?
No.
No. Why?
I wouldn't. Because it's not a very good job, to be honest.
Why do you say that?
It's a big statement.
No, it's just a stressful existence.
Do you think Brad has a better existence now than you do?
Yeah.
In terms of your professional...
Yep. Yep.
Newly unveiled Essendon coach Brad Scott says he's ready to roll up his sleeves to guide the club back to the top.
Once more a senior coach, Brad Scott touched down at Tulla, now carrying the dreams of Essendon's desperate faithful, who hope this isn't another false dawn.
This is one of the most exciting days in this football club's history.
Redmond loves to run forward, and he knows already. His signature celebration. He's getting really bold. He goes to barrel. Jakey Strick has pulled out the extra Sunday barrel, and he's nailed it from 60. Jake's got 4, and that's one of the highlights of the year.
Smiling coach, well, he might be 3-1, but his brother famously warned him against it, Chris, when he was sitting in that very chair 2 years ago. Were you watching that night, and have you had those conversations with him since, and have you made the right move?
Oh, we talk about it probably a little bit more over the last 3 years when I wasn't coaching, and I think he's just referring to it's a really challenging job, and the role I had at the AFL, he knew I was really enjoying, and in terms of absolute quality of life, it's probably a smarter decision to stay at the AFL. But ultimately, you miss it, and it's not until you're away from it that you realise how much you miss it. So I understand what he was saying. Would I want my brother or someone really close to me to do it? I'd probably advise them against it because it's a bloody tough job.
That's still fascinating because a lot of coaches would fear their next job. It's part of what. It's not the reason they coach, but it's the reason why they coach perhaps a bit longer because it can be a big pay drop and it can be a lifestyle change. You had the other job. You had one of the biggest jobs in footy. So it must have been a quantum decision to give that up when you had an alternative life already set up.
Yeah, and it took probably 3 years to come to that conclusion. There were opportunities to potentially look at coaching again, and it just wasn't the right time. But a whole lot of factors came together at the right time, meaning that this was an opportunity I was keen to pursue. But everything had to come together at the right time.
Are you surprised they haven't replaced you at the AFL yet?
I am in a way, but I have an enormous amount of respect for Laura Kane and the job that she's doing, and she's more than capable. Why not give her the job then? I think the sole reason would be that the AFL CEO hasn't been announced yet, and I think whoever is appointed as CEO, he or she has the right to appoint, the EGM of football that they think's the right person.
I know we're digressing, but I'm sure this is a perfect week to name the new CEO of the AFL. I mean, before Gather Round, Gillan McLachlan always said he'd finish up around now. It sounds like Tasmania's going to happen. Good signs from the federal government, and I really hope it changes. I know Brad can't say too much. But...
Well, I was just going to ask you, you worked for Andrew Dillon. Do you think he could do the job, and would he be your pick?
Oh, well, it's not my role to pick the AFL CEO, but he could. He's as good as anyone I've seen at an executive level. He's got all the bases covered. He's a wealth of knowledge, and the only thing I'd say about Dill is he doesn't seek the limelight, which a lot of people in football do. But he's a fantastic operator, and when any big decision is made at the AFL, he's involved in it.
Shaping up as a firm favourite, but who knows? Go ahead.
We saw Jake Stringer yesterday and his enormous talent, and with that, some of the frustration. There he is talking about something that I wasn't aware of, but the concussion battles that he had late last year and through the pre-season this year, which made his job of preparing himself a little bit harder.
You're one of those critics,
Well,
by
I have been, Hutchie, and I want to ask Brad about that. Did he come back in poor shape, Brad, as I observed, and how frustrating of a player is he when he can do this but doesn't do it consistently enough?
Well, if he was consistently getting 10 shots at goal every week, he'd be the best player in the history of the game. So it's I think when you're at that level and you can do those amazing things, it's hard to be consistent because...
Has he prepared himself the best he possibly can to give himself the best chance to do that consistently?
Yeah, look, I think in the circumstances he has. I mean, Jake's revealed his battles with concussion. I wasn't prepared to do that publicly. I talked to his other injuries, and he played injured last year, and it was a struggle for him to present. And the reality is he's very different to a lot of other players. He's a strength power based player, and he's not a transition runner, nor do we want him to be either. So, I was never concerned about Jake's attitude and what he did. But that being said, we weren't going to play him until he was right to play, and we brought him back through the VFL, and he played really well on the weekend.
As can often happen, Caro has an elephant in the room.
Well, I reckon there are two elephants down at the hangar. I mean, and this has been something that is referred to publicly before, but a lot of people in the industry are admirers and friends of yours. And there seems to be a collective anger from the AFL, from Clubland, that certain guarantees were made to you when you took on the job. One of those elephants is Kevin Sheedy, and the other one is the relationship between Adrian Dodoro and Josh Marnie. So you've got the club legend coming out and saying he wanted someone else to do the job in James Hird, and he's still on the board, which just baffles us all, just baffles us. I know he's standing in the game, and he's continuing, to spruik the club at various coterie functions, etc., with Mark Harvey. And then you've got a head of footy who was critical of the list manager, and both of whom at one point we thought were going, and the relationship, whatever anyone says, is still tricky. And you're having to deal with this when you were guaranteed that this might be fixed.
Yeah, I think what I was guaranteed is that we would do our best to provide stability for the football club, and it's difficult to be stable when you've got things going on in the background. And in terms of Sheeds, I was never concerned about his loyalty to James Hird, and I'd expect nothing less. And I think Lee Matthews would have the same loyalty towards me.
Lee would never have said that.
I doubt he would, but in terms of it's a bit like the over-indexing on protecting your people. I just didn't take that personally. And Kevin's a really important part of the history of the Essendon Football Club, and he still has an ambassadorial role and an important role. And sometimes he gets put in difficult situations where he's asked questions about footy matters. So that's a challenge for him. But the stability is what we're seeking. And, the Josh and Adrian stuff, it goes on. But in the footy department, it's a high-functioning footy department at the moment.
Caro described it as a ticking time bomb, those two.
Yeah, that's not my observation. I mean, that we have meetings on a daily basis, and it's not like they're fighting on a daily basis. Do they disagree on things? Yes, they do, but that's what good committees should do. They should have robust debate.
You wouldn't consider that to be an ideal relationship, though?
I think it's a fully functioning relationship. I don't think you have to be best friends to...
Do you expect them to be there both at the end of the year?
Well, it's just a complete guess, and it's they're both very good operators in their own right, and the stability for the footy club is what we're after. And Craig Vozzo's been appointed as CEO, and that falls within his remit to sort that out. But
you did have to stamp your feet a little bit with match committee. It had been a little casual. It looked like that Adrian had gone from time to time, and Mark Harvey. And can you step us through why the need to clean that up?
Well, it's a pretty simple one. I mean, we wanted to tighten up our match committee and just have, a smaller group to make those decisions. And, I've really learnt through time. And in my previous role as head coach, we had a cast of thousands at match committee, and I thought it was a really inefficient way of doing it. So it wasn't anything personal. It was just more that I want a tight group, and, we don't need to seek 15 people's opinions on who we pick.